Hi, Jordan. I think my question somehow relates to Yang's question. Just going to read it out. So while the C-19 crisis presents a great chance to get people to question existing institutions and to deploy new ways of sense making, it also creates a chance for governments to introduce lasting authoritarian measures without resistance, as they can be effective in the current situation. So how can something like decentralized collective intelligence or Game B gain traction in a time in which authoritarian measures can be perceived as a valid fallback option to weather a crisis situation like this?
Yeah, well, I think this goes back to that notion of kairos. I think right now we're in a situation where things could either move very well or they can move very poorly. I think the general answer is if we were on the other side of authoritarian measures being put in place, it will make it much harder for us. Not catastrophic. It's not impossible. It'll just make it much harder. And by the way, it'll make the consequences of the shift more, let's call it energetic. So the key right now is to figure out how can we go about nudging and influencing the shift that takes place so as to minimize that. And wherever possible, actually maximize the good side. So I'll give you a concrete example. This is really, really real. Like right now and over the next several days and near-term weeks, significant choices are being made in the United States and everywhere else around the world. The choices have largely already been made in China, as I understand it, about how we're going to go about trying to address the problem of contact tracing, for example, or testing. Now, there are many, many possible solutions, and actually now come to mind with Ivan Illich. There have always been many solutions around education. We just chose the ones that were bad. There are many solutions to the question of how do we actually build an infrastructure that is able to powerfully, effortlessly respond to the problem domain of these kinds of events, to crises along the viruses. What I would like to see is wisdom being used in those designs. And I don't mean this naively. There are actually people asking for that. And significant, powerful people are asking for that. We just need to find a way to create space for it and then bring the right people in so that we can actually propose designs that will solve the problem well for the long term, and not only without threats to freedom and liberty and our capacity to communicate effectively with each other, but actually upgrading that, make it better. So I think right now the situation is the die are about to be cast, and it is incumbent upon us to find a way to put pressure to create the space to make sure that good solutions are put in place. If we can find like one thing, so I already said, if there's one thing that comes out of this that I would like to see be a boom, be a massive shift in the nature of how we go about supporting the development of our children. If I had one thing that I would talk about people just rallying around and just saying no to, would be just short-term, mindless solutions to these problems. You know what? If I could get people to say, I am willing to stay in quarantine for another 6 weeks in exchange for having a good solution to this problem, like a trade-off on the part of the people. We demand a good design. We demand that something that actually makes sense. In exchange, we're not going to riot in the streets. We're not going to do crazy stuff. We're okay. We will create some space for this to happen. All right, that would be a wonderful thing. Now, I don't know if we can pull it off because there's a lot of diverse interests out there, and I get it. I mean, people who have small businesses right now are feeling really, really put upon, and people who work for a living and don't have a lot of coverage are feeling really, really put upon. I understand that. And so there's an urgency to figure out how to put solutions together. So such as it is, right? Kairos is never pretty. We're right in the middle of a very messy circumstance, and bad things are happening left and right. So we've got to try to figure out how we can get as smooth as possible to make as good things happen too.